Labą dieną.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I welcome you to the meeting, both participating online and live in person. The conference is organized by the Committee on Audit of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania and the National Audit Office of Lithuania. The conference is titled All Public Procurement is Green, Vision or Reality, and that is aimed at discussing public procurement in Lithuania. And without further ado, I'd like to give the floor for the organizers of this conference for a welcome address. I give the floor to Ms. Raza Budbergytė, Deputy Chair of the Committee on Audit.
Labas rytas, gerbėmieji ir mėlieji.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Tikrai malonu visus jūs matyti. Šiandien susirinkome į tokią nors ir ne itin gausią, bet vis tiek nepaprastai svarbią konferenciją, mano akimis žiūrint. Tikrai pakalbėti, apsitarti, ką galvojam, kaip matom, ar tikrai mes, Lietuva, kaip valstybė šiuo metu, 23 metais, esame pajėgus pasiekti tą ambicingą tikslą, kurį esame išsikėlę. Tai yra 23 metais turėti net 100% žaliųjų viešųjų pirkimų. Aš visai nebejoju, kad šioje salėje tikriausiai nėra ne vieno, kuris man nepasakytų taip, mes suprantame, kad mūsų tikslas yra tikrai labai svarbus, nes ekonomika, kad būtų konkurencinga, jinai jau šiandien dieną turi tikrai, kaip sakoma, tapti tuo žygiuotoju, kuris yra tikrai labai dar neįsiliejęs į žaliąją ekonomiką, į žiedinę ekonomiką, kad tas tikslas saugoti aplinką tikrai ir klimatą tikrai yra šventas dalykas. Tikriausiai visi sutinkate ir aš manau, kad šiandien mes kalbėsim ne apie tai ir ginčysimės ne dėl to. Mes kalbėsime apie tai, ar iš tiesų tas ambicingas tikslas, kurį išsikėlė vyriausybė, jau šiais metais turėti tą 100% žaliųjų pirkimų yra realus ir ar jis gali būti pasiektas. Jau 22 metų pabaigoje padarytas valstybės kontrolės vertinimas tikrai rodo, kad panašu, kad to mes nepasieksime. Ir visa rinka taip pat mums siunčia signalus apie tai, kad tiekėjai nėra pasiruošę dalyvauti taip, kad pirkimas įvyktų tikrai žalias, o ne toks, koks, kaip žinote, mes įpratę esame sakyti, pasidėsiu paukščiuką ir formaliai dėl to, kad aš atspausdinau sąskaitą ant perdirbto popieriaus, jau čia yra žaliasis pirkimas. Viešųjų pirkimų tarnyba irgi siunčia signalus mums audito komitetui apie tai, kad iš tiesų trūksta kompetencijų ir dalyviams, taip pat ir viešųjų pirkimų organizatoriams, kaip iš tiesų padaryti tuos viešuosius pirkimus, kad jie būtų žali realybėje, o ne popieriuje. Na ir audito komitetas, kurio pagrindinė funkcija yra tikrai pasižiūrėti, kaip viešieji finansai racionaliai, efektyviai yra naudojami, mums irgi kyla abejonių, ar užsibrėždami tokį ambicingą tikslą mes iš tiesų padarėme savo laiku tą viešųjų finansų kaštų naudos analizę ir iš tiesų, kokia yra ta pusiausvyra. Tarp to reiškia, kaip mes darom tos žaliuosius pirkimus, kiek mes išleidžiam, kiek jie pabrangsta tie galų gale viešieji pirkimai, ne tik tai tiekėjams, galbūt sakykime, bet taip pat ir viešajam sektoriui, kuris pirkimus organizuoja. Ir ar yra ta pusiausvyra ir kaip turi būti pasiekta ta sinergija. Todėl tikrai, man atrodo, labai laiku mes šiandien susirinkome pakalbėti. Labai ačiū valstybės kontroliai, kuri iš tiesų pasiūlė tikrai labai gerą idėją, labai savalaikę, nes mes turim pradėti kalbėti kuo anksčiau apie tai, kas iš tiesų gali mums kelti nors mažiausių abejonių ir mažiausią nerimą. Šiandien turime svečių iš Europos komisijos, iš Europos audito rūmų, akademinės visuomenės atstovų. Taip pat turime atstovus ir iš rinkos. Ir aš manau, kad šiandien ir viešųjų pirkimų vadovas tarnybos pasiruošęs yra tikrai įdomų pranešimą, kiek teko jau dabar pakalbėti, padaryti. Aš manau, kad tikrai mes šiandien labai konstruktyviai ir vaisingai pakalbėsime ir galbūt iš tiesų bus mums daugiau ir aiškumo, o gal netgi sugebėsim pateikti ir kažkokius tai įžvalgas, matymus, kurie bus naudingi ir mūsų vykdomai valdžiai. Taip kad visus labai kviečiu aktyviai dalyvauti diskusijose, pasisakyti, užduoti klausimus. Ir tikrai labai linkiu visiems mums šiandien geros tos, kaip sakoma, darbingos atmosferos. Ačiū labai, kad atėjote dalyvauti.
Ačiū Rasai Budbergytei ir nelaukdama perduodu žodį Mindaugui Macijauskui, Lietuvos Respublikos Vyriausybės kontrolieriui.
Mindaugas Macijauskas.
Labai diena visiems dar kartą ir iš tiesų smagu matyti taip gausiai susirinkusius. Tikiu, kad mus žiūri šiuo metu ir gausus būrys žmonių už kompiuterio ar televizorių ekrano. Tema, apie kurią mes šiandien diskutuosim, žalieji viešieji pirkimai, misija įmanoma ar įgyvendinama. Na, iš tiesų, matyt, klausimas, kurį iškėlėme dar praėjusiu metu rugsėjo mėnesį, atlikę mūsų vertinimą ar pasirengę vykdyti žaliuosius pirkimus 100%, iškėlė tam tikrų klausimų ir neatsakytų dalykų, kiek, kaip ir ką mes galim padaryti, kad nediskredituotumėm to žaliojo kurso. Nediskredituotumėm tikrai ambicingos vyriausybės idėjos, ambicingo vyriausybės tikslo. Ir patys matyt, tiek kaip valstybės kontrolė, tiek kaip žmonės puikiai suprantame pačią žaliojo kurso iniciatyvas ir jas be abejonės palaikom. Tačiau po kiekviena ambicija matyt turėtų būti tam tikras tvirtas pagrindas, paskaičiuota nauda, poveikis, nes visą tai darome už valstybės biudžeto pinigus, darome iš mokesčių mokėtojų pinigus, naudodami juos ir naudodami valstybės turtą. Atkreipiame dėmesį, kad įsipareigojimai nuo 2023 metų visam viešam sektoriui reikalingas prekes
commitments by 2023 for the public sector to procure all goods and services via green public procurements without causing any harm to the environment, or at least mitigating the effect to the environment. Well, apparently we're not fully prepared to achieve our objectives. Apparently only 66% of the people conducting public procurement surveyed tell us that they will not be ready to conduct all the public procurements as green procurements by 2023. 51% of the tenders also admit that they are not sure whether or not they will be able to meet the requirements set for conducting green public procurements and ensure that the products procured via public procurements are green. The surveys also reveal that green products procured via public procurements have the price that is 3.5 times higher than regular products. Well, nobody has any doubt as to the benefits of the green public procurements to achieve sustainable goals, rather than leaving this as objectives on paper. However, in order to achieve 100% of green public procurements, environmental requirements must be put in place not only with regards to the products that are solely green. All products that are procured through the public procurement procedures must comply with the environmental requirements. The idea of discrediting the green transitions in the public procurement is considered to be a serious risk, and our National Audit Office is focusing a great deal on this issue. We're also looking into classified public procurements and the requirements that are placed on such public procurements in particular. in general, green public procurements occupy a large part of our agenda, our institution. Today we will listen to some keynote speakers that focus on the European agenda and the actions on the EU-wide actions with regards to public procurement. We have invited policymakers and those that execute the policy on behalf of the European institutions. And I hope that today's discussion will make it possible for us to realize the outcome of our reports, in addition to ensuring sustainable use of the national budget fund. So I wish you fruitful discussions, and I hope that together we'll be able to find joint solutions that we'll be able to share with other institutions, and the government will be able to follow up on them. Thank you, and I wish you a good conference. Thank you very much. And since we've heard that we're going to listen to some presentations on behalf of the European Commission, let me inform you that the European Commissioner, Mr. Virginijus Sinkevičius, was unable to be here in person, so instead he sent us his welcome address, a video welcome address, so I would like us to focus on the video now. Thank you.
Dear members of parliament, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to address you today on this important matter of public procurement. Public procurement is massive in terms of its size and value. In the European Union, public procurement amounts to 14% of GDP or 1.8 trillion euros. The numbers in Lithuania are quite impressive as well. In our country, public procurement amounts to 12% of GDP, approximately 6 billion euros. Today, the whole policy of the European Union is based on the Green Deal. For this reason, green public procurement is especially relevant in shaping the course of the market and transitioning to the circular economy. By choosing a green direction, we increase the demand for sustainable products and step up the fight against the climate change. For more than a decade, the European Commission has been developing voluntary green public procurement criteria in the areas of construction, food and catering, computer equipment. Unfortunately, the criteria have some clear disadvantages and don't live up to their potential, mainly because the criteria are voluntary. If we want a real change in the area, we must be more ambitious and move on to mandatory green public procurement criteria. These requirements are already introduced for some sectors in the Circular Economy Action Plan, as well in the proposal for a new battery regulation. We plan to include them in future regulations on eco-design packaging and packaging waste, energy efficiency and construction products. With the support of the European Council and the European Parliament, we will also be able to introduce mandatory green criteria for public spending. Of course, we will work closely with public businesses and public authorities. Most people want to choose more sustainable products and services, but it's not always easy to put it in practice. That's why we have recently adopted a new proposal to fight greenwashing and misleading green claims. It will help to mobilize industries towards a more transparent circular economy and will provide consumers with accurate information before they buy goods or services. Our research shows that roughly half of all green claims are inaccurate, misleading, or even completely false. That is why we have proposed a regulatory framework that will give consumers reliable and verified information. Companies will have to prove that the green claims they are making are correct and justified. This is good news for the companies that already comply with the rules and for consumers, who will be confident about their sustainable choices. Today, we must reassess the way we create, produce and buy. We have to reuse natural resources more responsibly, reduce our energy consumption and choose sustainable products. These are the principles of forward-looking businesses that will eventually offer alternative business models, create new jobs and change our habits. Green public procurement is a significant part of this change, and so I believe that the application of the environmental protection principles in public procurement could serve as a great tool for achieving green transition and for implementing the Green Deal. Thank you for your attention.
Dabar trumpa organizacinė informacija.
Thank you very much. Now some technical information. Our conference is divided into two parts. In the first part, we will listen to 4 keynote speeches, and we plan to have a possibility for a question and answer session following each presentation. Since the speakers will be speaking in 2 languages, there is simultaneous interpretation available. Those of you who are sitting at the table, you can use your headsets to listen to the interpretation. If you need, there are some headsets at the back of the hall to listen to the interpretation. Those of us joining online, there is a possibility available to press the button Interpretation, allowing you to listen to the interpretation in English or Lithuanian. If you have a question pending, please raise your hand, and you can do that online by pressing a virtual hand. Questions may also be given by online viewers through Zoom. They can pose the questions through the Q&A column on the program. Those of us asking questions here in the hall, please make sure you turn on your microphone before asking the questions. So that will be all as regards technical information. By the way, there will be no break in between the 2 parts of the conference. Not all of the keynote speakers are here, so we're still waiting for some people to arrive. And now I would like to give the floor to the first keynote speaker, Ms. Malgorzata Gołębiewska, member of the Directorate General for Environment from the European Commission. She's the head of the Ecological Footprint Group. So, good morning, ma'am. And she will focus on empowering consumers in the green transition, the EU action against the green lie. So, Malgorzata, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning. I hope you can see my presentation well, and you can hear me well. It's a pleasure of being here and being able to present to you the latest proposal from the European Commission to regulate substantiation and communication of environmental claims made by companies to consumers. Why did we set requirements on environmental claims? I think you have heard previously with the Commissioner's video that we have identified that the area of environmental claims made by companies to consumers is currently largely unregulated. And for this reason, companies do not have clear rules how these environmental claims should be made if they wish to make them. And therefore, there are various interpretations as to the best way forward. On one hand, when it comes to the companies making the claim. On the other hand, when it comes to the consumer protection authorities enforcing the existing legislation. So with this proposal, we are filling this regulatory gap to protect consumers and companies from greenwashing, to enable consumers to make informed purchasing decisions based on credible environmental claims and credible environmental labels. We also want to boost the competitiveness of the economic operators that actually make good efforts so that their claims on the environmental sustainability of their products and services, and then the claims they make about them. And finally, to improve the legal certainty and to ensure that there is level playing field on the single market. All of this, of course, serves the overall purpose of accelerating the green transition towards a circular, clean, and climate neutral economy. Let me briefly present to you the legislative proposal itself. The proposal is a complementary proposal to the one amending the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. It's a directive that's already in place. And last year in March, the Commission proposed some changes with the view of fighting greenwashing. And specifically, the Commission last year proposed that environmental claims made by businesses should all be substantiated with a relevant assessment. This proposal complements the proposal from last year and also covers business-to-consumer commercial communication and applies only to voluntary environmental claims. What does it mean, voluntary? It means claims that are made by companies because they wish to make them, not because they are required to make them legally. So whenever a company wants to communicate on the basis of their environmental performance to consumers, and there's no obligation to do so, the company can do that. For these reasons, all the definitions are aligned with consumer protection framework. And what is important to note is that the proposal does not apply to any environmental claims that are already regulated by other union rules. So whenever there are no rules on consumer information regarding environmental performance, that's when the Green Claims Directive enters into play. You can see the definition on the right-hand side of an environmental claim. It's very general. It actually includes any form of representation, including labels, brand names, company names, product names, but also text, pictorial or graphic representation in the context of commercial communication. So what are we proposing that the companies should do to substantiate and communicate their environmental claims? This proposal focuses on the substantiation elements and requires that all claims made to consumers should be backed by credible and proportionate substantiation. Substantiation understood as kind of an assessment that leads to the claim. So this assessment should be backed by scientific evidence, should take into account the relevant international standards, should demonstrate that the claim, the environmental claim that is made, addresses significant environmental issues from a life cycle perspective. This is to avoid situations whereby companies would be making claims on marginal improvement that in the end do not make a lot of difference when it comes to environmental performance. In addition, the environmental issues should be considered from a life cycle perspective. A life cycle perspective means from the moment that the product is designed until through the production, consumption, and use, and at the end of life of a product. This is because if we have an improvement in one life stage of a product, it should not be at the expense of worsening performance at the other stages. So the assessment should identify the trade-offs between impact, between life stages, and be transparent. Transparent on the trade-offs, and then in case claims are made in the climate-related area, for example, on climate neutrality of products, there should be transparency that the achievement of this, let's say, climate neutrality is not because the product is completely neutral to the environment, but because the producer made use of climate offsets. When it comes to the communication of environmental claims, the proposal requires that the producers can only communicate to consumers what has been substantiated. So only what is backed by the evidence can be communicated to consumers, and that information on substantiation should be made available to consumers on product itself via a web link or a QR code so that it's easily verifiable. Let me highlight here that it does not mean that we need full life cycle assessments for all types of claims. Not all types of claims will require this. For example, if a company wants to communicate that it does not use certain chemicals in the production of the product, or that, for example, a food product is pesticide-free, it does not require a full life cycle assessment of all the other environmental impacts from cradle to grave, so throughout the life cycle. However, it should be considered whether this may lead to any trade-offs. So such assessment requires a certain life cycle overview of the possible impacts of the product. We have foreseen in our proposal an exemption for microenterprises. Microenterprises being companies that employ less than 10 employees and that have a annual turnover below 2 million euros. They're exempted from the obligation of substantiation and communication requirements and claims. However, they are free to opt in if they want to be part of the system. So there is this optional approach. But this does not mean that we give the mandate to those smallest companies for greenwashing. They still cannot greenwash. They still cannot make misleading claims in line with the consumer protection framework. It's just that they are free to choose not to comply with the obligation of substantiation, communication, and verification under this directive. This directive also introduces a new regime for environmental labeling. In our underlying impact assessment, we have identified that the proliferation of environmental labeling schemes is a problem within the European internal market. This leads to undermining the trust of consumers that are confronted with numerous and often unreliable labels, and therefore make it more difficult for producers to actually credibly advertise the products that are truly more sustainable. So the environmental labeling schemes should be based on certification schemes. That means that there is a third party that is independent from the producers that are part of the scheme. And they decide whether the label can be granted, whether the product meets the requirements, and then checks if the label should be maintained or withheld in case the product no longer meets the criteria. So there is a set of governance requirements for such environmental labeling schemes to ensure that they're based on a credible system and transparent system. In addition, the proposal foresees that new labels or new labeling schemes should not be developed. And when it comes to public schemes, so schemes run by public authorities, we would like to favor development of such schemes at the EU level instead of having a multitude of national or regional schemes within the EU. We believe that this will benefit the EU consumers better because they'll be confronted with a coherent, consistent messaging across the EU internal market. For this reason, we are asking that no new public schemes are set up at regional or national level, and in case public authorities want to set up new environmental labeling schemes, this should be done jointly at the EU level. In addition, we are also putting a halt to new private schemes. They're still allowed, but they can only be set up if they can demonstrate that there is added value of having this labeling scheme. So, for example, that the environmental ambition is higher, or the scope of the scheme includes more products, or concerns a niche where there's no environmental labeling scheme yet. These new private schemes will be allowed following an approval by the national authority. When it comes to the third country schemes, so coming from outside of the EU, in case they're developed by public authorities, they will have to be approved by the Commission to operate on the Union market on the basis of the same criteria, or by national authorities in case of private schemes. So there is a shared split responsibility. Let me finally say that when it comes to communication of environmental performance on the labels, we are proposing that in case labels want to aggregate several environmental impacts into one overall score, for example, graded A, B, C, D, E, that sort of indicators should be developed again at the EU level only, because otherwise the consumers may be confronted with seeing different scores on the same product depending who develops the labeling schemes. We have seen that in the food sector, whereby one type of a label is given by one retail chain, and then the same product in another shop gets a different score under a different labeling scheme. So that's highly confusing. Finally, a real novelty of this proposal is the system of verification. We have foreseen an ex-ante verification, so a verification before the claim is made to consumer is published by an independent and accredited verifiers that are competent to certify that the substantiation of the claim and the labeling schemes itself meet the requirements of the directive. This verification would result in issuing the certificate of conformity that would be recognized across the EU and that would travel with the claim. That means that we give more certainty to producers making the claims that they can actually make the claims in line with the requirements of our directive. And then it would also help the competent authorities to check and to enforce compliance with the directive. Because then they could actually prioritize their efforts on claims that do not have the certificate of conformity or the labeling schemes that do not have such certificate of conformity. Again, microenterprises, if they wish to opt in to be part of the system and receive the certificate of conformity, they can do so, but otherwise they are exempted from the obligation. We are aware that small and medium-sized enterprises may be confronted with proportionately higher cost of substantiation and verification of their claims. For this reason, we are opting for some support flanking measures to help the SMEs to substantiate their claims. We will develop high-quality data sets that can be useful to assess environmental impacts within the value chains. On the other hand, we are also asking the member states to raise awareness amongst the companies of the ways to comply with the directive, provide financial and technical support, technical assistance, and facilitate the access to finance. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Ar salėje turime klausimų per nuotolį?
Are there any questions here in the hall? I see no questions raised online. Malgožata, if I may, I would like to ask my question on my own. What kind of period are we talking about? When will all of these requirements come into effect? What is the transitional period envisaged?
Thank you very much. So the proposal was adopted in March this year, and we are only starting to discuss it in the councils with the member states and the national authorities, and also with the European Parliament. This process may finish before the next elections to the European Parliament in June next year. But in case it doesn't, then of course it will finish only at the latest in the autumn next year. So it depends to a large extent on the legislative process and the speed of it. Then, once the proposal becomes a directive, it enters into force, then the member states will have 2 years to transpose it into national law. And that's when the rules will actually enter into application. So we are talking about the period of around 3 years to see the rules entering into application.
Ačiū. Taip pat buvo smagu išgirsti,
Thank you very much.
Paliktos.
Well, we were happy to hear. I'm sorry, I see Artūras Skardžius is willing to ask a question.
Paklausti ponios Malgožatos, kuri dar Europos Sąjungos narė be Lietuvos
which EU member state besides Lithuania has set a goal to achieve 100% of its public procurements as green by 2023? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'm afraid I do not have the answer to this question. Maybe my colleague who will be presenting to you afterwards, specifically on the green public procurement, will be able to provide you with this information.
Ačiū, Malgožata. Ir tada kviečiu sekantį pranešėją.
In that case, we will now give the floor to our next keynote speaker, again, a representative of the European Commission, Mr. Ivan Azevedo, member of the Directorate General for Environment. Oh, I see he hasn't joined us online yet. Perhaps I could then ask Mr. Darius Vedriskas to deliver his speech a bit earlier. He's the director of the Public Procurement Office, and he will talk on the green public procurement, so whether or not the organizations should achieve 100% of green public procurements, issue to be decided by the entire organization.
Gerbiami Seimo nariai, valstybės kontrolierių,
Members of Parliament, Auditor General, guests, I'm grateful to the Committee on Audit and the National Audit Office for the opportunity to participate here and for the initiative, both to the Committee and the National Audit Office in organizing the conference. The topic is very relevant and most probably the buying organizations find this topic rather painful and sensitive. When it comes to 100% of green procurement, which is the title of my presentation as well, well, it does seem like an ambitious objective. Now, maybe I'll repeat myself, but this ambition has been set in the decision by the government of June 2021, and it was said that by 2023 all procurement have to be green. I believe that this objective is very ambitious because if we looked at the year 2018 or 2019, the value of public procurement and the number of green procurement was approximately 5%, which means that the government has adopted the objective to make a leap in terms of green procurement and to make all of the public procurement to be green, which means that the government of the public procurement in buying organizations have to be changed. We also have to pay more attention to environmental issues. It should also be noted that when it comes to the requirement for green public procurement since 2021 to 2023, the concept of green procurement has changed. Also, the attitudes toward the green procurement has changed. The Ministry of Environment has done a great job in updating the list of products, and it also updated the definition of what green procurement is. Another important is that as we feel happy about the increasing number of the green procurement, we are very happy to see that the attitudes of organizations have also changed. In 2018, only very few companies conducted green procurement. Well, in 2023, the change is substantial because almost 89% of organizations conducted green procurement. We do know about certain differences when it comes to the value of green procurement from the total value. The figures are different, and if the value exceeds 80%, then the figure is that 1 out of 6 procurement is green. And despite the fact that our objective is to achieve 100% of green procurement by 2023, we should draw attention to certain groups of purchasing subjects. Some products are more green, while others are less green, which means that the organizations face with problems as to how to make certain groups of purchases green. Therefore, we can, well, it has been mentioned that it is not enough to put a tick, because this will not help us achieve any value when it comes to reducing and mitigating climate change. Majority of organizations face a huge such problem, whose responsibility is it to ensure that all public procurement is green? Is that the public procurement office or the organization itself or someone else? So
žali ir kad tam turi susitelkti visa perkančioji organizacija, tai galbūt galima būtų sakyti netgi plačiau, kad tai yra ne tik organizacijos atsakomybė, bet
it is not the responsibility only of the organization, but it is the responsibility of the government, of the state,
viešuosius pirkimus 100%
to
turėtume
ensure a 100% target.
Jeigu kalbame organizacijos lygmenyje, tai
if we talk about the organization level,
organizacijos strategijoje,
the organization strategy is drafted for a few years period. It contains several objectives, targets, and what the company is going to strive for. The company also drafts a procurement planning. This is the document that is valid for 1 year.
Ir iš tikrųjų tai, kad dažnu atveju viešųjų pirkimų žalinimas tampa viešųjų pirkimų
the greening of public procurement becomes the responsibility of the departments responsible for procurement planning. Therefore, the companies have to calculate the criteria for green procurement and raise questions that, well, if they start the procurement in 2022 or 2023, the procurement that was started back in 2022 will not be green, and it will have a negative impact on the outcome of 2023. Well, this shows a very narrow approach of the company, and this shows that the companies themselves have not adopted strategic objectives, and they are not sure which environmental targets they are pursuing. To my opinion, there is a need for a systemic approach towards public procurement, beginning with the strategy of the entire organization that should include the sustainability policy of the organization, as well as set the objectives for the implementation of the sustainability policy. It is very important to have those documents, because what we see today is that, irrespective of the 100% target by 2023, only 6 out of 10 public procurement is green. This happens due to several reasons. The buying organizations have not set objectives in their own strategies when it comes to their environmental objectives. The organizations usually do not have objectives when it comes to, let's say, reducing their carbon footprint or reducing pollution or reducing wastewater. So, once there are no objectives, no clear objectives in their strategic planning, the company consequently has no indicators which it has to achieve by the end of one or another year.
Per aplinkos ministro patvirtintą tvarką, tai būtent per kriterijus, kurie yra nustatyti sistemiškai visiems.
The companies could use the services of central buying organizations, but we are not sure whether this responds to the strategy of the buying organizations and the ambitions of this buying organization when it comes to reducing environmental impact. I believe that much more needs to be done, because in the absence of national and governmental strategy and clearly defined environmental criteria, objectives, suppliers find it difficult to identify what the buying organizations are trying to achieve, how the supply chains have to be changed, and what are the country's priority sectors and what is its purchasing, public procurement policy.
Ir darnumo politikos reikalavimus. Tai būtų iš tikrųjų labai didelis žingsnis į priekį, jeigu tokie lūkesčiai kriterijai būtų nustatyti. Kitas dalykas, kad būtų paruošti tam tikri darnumo politikos gairių,
there is a need to prepare the guidelines which purchasing organizations could make use of. Organizations in their strategies, as well as heads of companies and departments, also have to have certain indicators that they must achieve, because this would become the part of the agenda, not of the whole company, but of each and every individual head of the unit or department. And this would contribute to implementing environmental policy objectives. Thank you for your attention, and I'm open to your questions.
Ačiū Dariui.
Thank you, Darius. I see no questions online, so perhaps there is anybody willing to ask a question or share your insights sitting here around the table. I know there are some colleagues from the Central Public Procurement Office. Artūras, maybe you? Well, I don't want to impose, but maybe our guests have some questions, but I will take the opportunity to ask Darius a question. You've mentioned that every sixth procurement is green, while the total sum of green procurements accounts to 80%, although we have to achieve 100% target. So how much green lie is there? Because apparently we are using both Lithuanian taxpayers' money as well as European funds. So it's a serious matter. Well, I hope there's no greenwashing here, but there's no bigger lie than statistics. Since statistics come from the public procurement reports, the Public Procurement Office is best aware of all the technical specifications, the contract performance conditions, and all other aspects related to public procurements. So I do hope that there's no greenwashing and there's no green lie, but we must keep in mind that the supplier will have to meet the green procurement requirements. And the statistics from previous year also shows that the interest in greening solutions is going down. So hopefully, there's not much green lie, but certainly the green public procurements have to go through certain stages. What we identify as green public procurement is something that will not be considered green in a few years' time. So we have to speak of higher standards, and reinforced requirements right now. Currently, the organizations determine the green requirements the way they understand. They even hire people who focus on the greening aspects within their organizations, but not every organization has such specialists. So we have to appreciate the initiatives of the organizations when In their strategic planning, they determine certain targets, certain green targets to be achieved by the organization, or let's say organizations have adopted their sustainability strategies. If we want to achieve comprehensive green public procurements, certain competences must be acquired, and this will take some time. Well then, Darius, looking at one of your slides, it had a very colorful scheme focusing on road laying sector and the construction sector. How can the construction materials in both sectors can be turned into green? Let's say, how can concrete be treated as a green construction material? Bearing in mind that we have this noble target in mind. Thank you for your question. In the public procurement sector, constructions account for a huge share. This is a very crucial sector. And certainly there's no green bitumen or no green concrete, one that would not be hazardous to environment. So we're not ready to talk about green materials such as those. However, the procurements can be treated as green in terms of different aspects. This can be done through technical specification, through certain qualifications required from the suppliers and others. We should not have the understanding that every object, every material within the construction sector should be green. Achieving such an objective certainly would take a lot of time. The definition of a green public procurement is much wider, and it does not require having each and every material as subject of green public procurements as fully green. Thank you very much. I would just like to inform you that we will also have one keynote speaker who will focus on making concrete greener. So thank you, Darius. I see one more hand raised, so please. Gytis Kauzanas. Bird rearing association. I have to say that the products that are treated as green are certified products. When it comes to bird rearing farms, we have an extremely limited number of such farms. And apparently, the requirements are very high for such farms. So what we need to do is go back to the discussion as to how we should define green public procurement, because there are definitely no fully green products available neither in Lithuania nor in Europe. Thank you for your question. I would just like to respond saying that we as an organization are focusing on green public procurements in general, and the organizations that are interested in having public procurements green are those that are in charge of organizing the procurements as such. And I believe you as an organization, you are more focused on green products per se. Well, now we have Mr. Ivanas Veidel joining us. He represents the European Commission as the Director General for Environment. He will speak on the green public procurement requirements from the European perspective, and he will basically, I believe, respond to the questions raised by Artura. So please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see me, I hope. Or can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
I have a presentation. Well, you can see my screen, can't you?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, thank you very much to start. It's really a pleasure to be here and address SEMAS on this very important topic. As you know, one of the most difficult barriers in the uptake of green public procurement is the political will. And this conference, this conference you have organized is a good example of political will. So it is really a pleasure to be here and to speak about what the European Commission is doing in the green public procurement policy. But to start, what is green public procurement? In our perspective, green public procurement is, to start, it is a process that runs in parallel with the public procurement process. And this process is to compare goods, services, and works with the objective to determine which of those goods, services, and works have the most reduced environmental impact through their life cycle. If public authorities decides to procure buildings made of wood, for example, this is not automatically green public procurement. Or if public buyers decide to procure furniture without plastic, this is not automatically green public procurement. Nor if public buyers procure organic foods, because there's a need to make this comparison of goods and services. This is the heart. This is at the heart of green public procurement, as you know. And actually, there are some myths that some people think that just for the fact that the public authority is procuring or is looking to procure organic food, for instance, this is already green, and this is in line with the green public procurement policy. Well, this is not always the truth, because, as you know, and when comparing and assessing the life cycle costs, it can happen that, for instance, organic meat is not so good for the environment. Another thing is that green public procurement is the process, as I said, where public authorities seek to procure goods, services, and works, not private entities. Sometimes we hear people saying that we would need to extend GPP, green public procurement, for private purchases. But this is not. This is another thing. This is not green public procurement. But in the green public procurement policy, it is not only the comparison is at the heart. The main objective is to purchase goods and services that have a reduced environment impact through their life cycle. But here in the European Commission, we also take a broader view on this, and this is why things get more complicated, because we have also to find the right balance. It is not only to look for the most environmental sustainable products. We have to look also for the market conditions. We have to see if there are enough suppliers that produce that good or provide that service. We have to see if the prices in the market are not extremely high. Another important element in green public procurement, in our perspective, is to target specific product groups. In our view, it is difficult to try to tackle all the products and services that the public administration procures. That's why we focus, and we have been focusing in specific product groups. And how do we choose those product groups? We choose them, well, there are several criteria to choose the product groups to tackle, but one of the most important aspects is the ability of that product group to influence the market, because the public administration buys or the public expenditure in a certain good or service is very high. So it is important to tackle that product group to influence the market. And for us in the European Commission, one thing that is crucial, as you know, is criteria, because to make this comparison of products and groups, to choose the products and services that have the most reduced environment impact through the life cycle, this is not easy for public buyers to do it in a case-by-case basis.
I'm sorry, if I may say, the slides are not moving.
The screen.
No, I'm not moving the slides.
You are not moving, but we can see the next slide as well.
Yes.
The full screen mode. Can you please turn it on, or we can help you by, but you will need to navigate us.
You don't see the full screen. Is that so?
Sorry.
No, thank you.
We can take over control from. Yes, thank you very much.
And now you can see the full screen?
Not fully full screen.
And now?
It's the same, back to the same
It's
one.
the same. And now?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry for interrupting.
No problem. So I was saying that criteria. Oh, and now I can hear my own voice. I was saying that criteria is indeed a crucial element in our work, and that's why the Commission, as you know, has been developing for more than I would say 15 years EU GPP criteria for specific product groups. These are, as I said, targeted product groups. We choose these product groups together with member states in the GPP advisory group. We have developed more than 20 GPP criteria for 20 product groups. We have currently 14 product groups, GPP criteria for product groups updated. They are translated in all the languages, official languages of the EU. This is, as you can imagine, and as most of you surely know, this is a very complex process it takes to develop criteria for each product groups. Normally, the Commission takes around 1 year. Currently, we are developing criteria for buildings. We started more than 1 year ago, and only at the end of this year, we hope we will be able to adopt recommended criteria for buildings. Actually, they already exist, but they are under revision now. Another important source of criteria that we are developing are criteria based on the new eco-label. I'm sorry, it's quite disturbing because I keep hearing my own voice. So this, as you know, the EU regulation on EU eco-label foresees the possibility for the Commission to adopt manuals to help contracting authorities to use requirements for the EU eco-label in public contracts. And the Commission, for the first time, is working on this. We are developing manuals for printed paper, for stationery paper, art covering products, and I hope in the future we will be able to develop more of these manuals. For you to have an idea of the main aspects that are considered by the Commission in the GPP criteria setting. Well, we look to environmental impacts, and this means that we look to, for instance, for emissions in the production phase, emissions afterwards. We look to biodiversity impacts. We look to the availability of recycled materials in the market, etc. Well, it depends on the product group, but we try to identify all possible environmental impacts. Another thing that is very, very, very important for us is the complexity in terms of verification. Normally, the Commission does not recommend criteria that are difficult to verify. So we pay a lot of attention on how public buyers can verify the criteria. Another element, very important, is that we assess the market's readiness. We speak with the market. We see, and it is not only in a member state, we assess the market in the all 27 member states to come up with criteria that fit all member states. This is, as I said, these are voluntary criteria. So member states will be able to adapt them, as you know. They can be more ambitious, less ambitious, but this is not mandatory. And of course, at the heart of criteria, we pay a lot of attention in the life cycle cost implications. This is a very science-based phase. This is why normally these criteria, these GPP criteria, are firstly developed by our DG in Sevilla, in Spain, where the scientists are, and they are the ones that make all these calculations. And of course, before adopting the criteria, we launch at least 2 sets of consultations among stakeholders. To give you an idea, if you are not familiar with the structure of criteria the Commission recommends, This is the general view. If you read criteria developed by the European Commission. So you have core criteria and comprehensive criteria. The core criteria are designed to allow for easy application of green public procurement, focusing on the key areas of environmental performance of the products, and are aimed at keeping administrative costs for companies to a minimum. And then we also have comprehensive criteria that are to be taken into account for aspects or higher levels of environmental performance to be used by authorities that want to go further in supporting environmental and innovation goals. Then we have the subject matter. It's what we want to procure, and the type of criteria. These, in our recommended GPP criteria, we have selection criteria, meaning to assess the ability or capacity of the supplier to perform the contract. We have technical specifications, award criteria, and contract performance clauses. To be honest, we don't use targets in the voluntary GPP criteria. And then you will always find a way to verify, so for the tender to demonstrate compliance, how the tender, the supplier can demonstrate compliance. And here you have a concrete example of a criterion. This example is taken from the GPP criteria for databases. You can see that we are recommending core criteria, and we are recommending the use of award criteria. And why is this? Why, in certain cases, the Commission does not? Sometimes we recommend award criteria, other times we recommend technical specifications, and other times we recommend both. Sometimes we recommend only award criteria because if we use technical specifications, we would exclude automatically goods or services that not respect technical specifications. And sometimes we find that the market is not ready for this, or there are some suppliers, but not enough suppliers. So that is why, for not excluding products or services, we recommend award criteria. So for not exclude suppliers, but to give some points, extra points to those that comply with some aspects. And here you can see the verification that the Commission proposes to be used. So third-party verification, ISO, MS, this is normally what we recommend. The second example I would like to show is again on databases. Here you have an example of a technical specification recommendation. Again, describing what exactly should be fulfilled and the means for the public buyer to verify that the tenderer complies with this technical specification. This was about what we have been doing for the last 14 years. But now, as you know, and Commissioner explained this in his intervention, the Commission is moving or is envisaging to have to propose minimum mandatory criteria. We have this. There are minimum mandatory criteria in some legislation already that you can see in the slide: the Clean Vehicles Directive, the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and in the future, well, the batteries regulation has been already adopted or agreed between Council and European Parliament. And you have other examples here where the Commission is, we are not exactly, these proposals do not present, if you read the proposals, you will not find green public procurement criteria. These legislative proposals empower the Commission to come up with green public procurement criteria in the future. And the Commission, in their proposals, we always propose to member states, to the Council, to the European Parliament, a broad range of criteria to be used, meaning that we propose that the Commission be empowered to use award criteria, technical specifications, contract performance clauses, and also targets. When we table proposals, we don't really know already which of these criteria we will use, because we have to make all the process I've spoke about. So we have to assess the market readiness, we have to assess environmental impacts, we have to assess everything. So when we propose legislative acts to empower the Commission to adopt minimum mandatory criteria, we would like very much to have a broad range of possibilities, because we don't really know when we table the proposal which of these criteria will be more suitable. Sometimes, as I explained, it will be better to use technical specifications, but sometimes it will be better to use only award criteria. Because if the market is not very ready, we should prefer to use, for instance, award criteria to not exclude any supplier. Concerning specifically targets, because I know that in Lithuania you are your policy, as far as I understood, is very, and it is quite okay. You are centered in or focused in targets. We have this interesting example in the EU legislation and GPP policy, which is the Clean Vehicles Directive. That it is the piece of legislation where you can find targets, because the legislation indeed defines clean vehicles, limited to, and clean vehicles means vehicles that have a certain amount of emissions. And then the directive sets national targets for public procurement as a minimum percentage of clean vehicles in the aggregate public procurement across a member state. In Lithuania, for light vehicles, just an example, it's 20.9%. The target is 20.9%. But a very interesting thing, and I think it's interesting to see that we have these targets in the EU legislation, but at the same time, we have EU voluntary GPP criteria for road transport. And the EU GPP criteria, so the voluntary criteria, they go further, much further than legislation. On legislation, we only address emissions from vehicles, but in GPP criteria, we address many other things. So air pollutant emissions produced along the supply chain of the energy carriers. It is not only the emissions that go out from a vehicle; it's also the emissions that are emitted, the pollutants that are emitted during the production phase. And there are also environmental impacts produced during the manufacture of, for instance, batteries for electric vehicles. Another thing that we assess is the noise emissions produced by vehicles and tires. So as you can see, GPP criteria, we have GPP criteria in fact in the directive, but we also have GPP which are mandatory, and we have in the form of targets, but we also have at the same time for the same product groups GPP criteria that go further. And here we do not recommend targets, we recommend the use of technical specifications and award criteria. And you can have our contacts, and that's it from my side. If you have questions, please.
Ačiū. Tai trumpai rezumuojant kriterijų.
Thank you. So, establishing criteria is a very long and complex process. It might take from 13 to 14 years. It involves researchers, and criteria were non-mandatory, but they will become some minimum requirement criteria will become mandatory, but depending on the market of one or another country, they will be able to choose which criteria could be applied. Thank you very much indeed. And Artūras Skardžius from the Committee on Audit has a question to you. Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is as follows. If Europe sets those criteria and decides to follow them, will Europe remain competitive in the global market, or how its competitiveness will change in respect to major polluters in the world, that is China and the US? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. Actually, this will be minimum mandatory criteria. A lot of assessments will be made not to disturb or not to hinder EU competitiveness. But this will be done. But another thing that we should have in mind is that actually sustainable criteria can be a boost for competitiveness. And a very good example we have is the batteries regulation. We have sustainability criteria there in this piece of legislation. We will have GPP criteria, and actually stakeholders, the industry, the European industry was very supportive of this regulation. because it gives somehow an advantage to EU producers, because when we set the ambition high, and we say that only batteries that comply with certain sustainability requirements will be able to enter into the market. We will be saying that batteries coming from other countries in the world that did not fulfill these requirements will not be able to enter into the market. So this can be, actually, sustainability can be a win-win for the environment, but also for companies and the EU economy. Thank you.
Ačiū labai ir dabar norėčiau padėkoti Ivanui.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to express my gratitude to Ivan Azevedo, who was with us despite some technical difficulties that we had in the beginning. And let us move on now to the next keynote speaker, Mr. Vytas Sirtautas, from the Inhus Engineering, head of the Lithuanian project department, who will focus on sustainability, and he will perhaps be able to respond to the question regarding green concrete. Thank you, Lina, for the introduction, and thank you to DALA, the Association of Construction Association, for inviting us to share our insight. My topic is sustainability and digitalization. We are building producers, manufacturers. We act on the idea and the principle of design build by bringing together individual competences into one and providing customers with different ways of implementing projects. We understand that the construction sector is responsible for the development of communities, and that today's projects will become a benefit or a burden for future generations in the search for sustainable solutions. Now, this is how the general idea looks like. We work with optimization, and we work with digital solutions in the design phase. After being awarded the contract, we then focus on the final warranties, and each phase is implemented following the lean principle. The implementation of the design-build projects through digitization of processes offers more opportunities for sustainability and CO2 reduction. And I will try to answer the question as to why this is possible. Digitalization enables transparency in the construction process and quality parameters. It is essential that the government supports companies in this process through various means. Equipment licenses, human resources, training, all of these issues are always with us in the sector for the businesses that are looking forward to digitization solutions. Digitalization enables companies to use new advanced technologies for both data processing and the construction process itself, and digitalization and technology contributes to sustainable solutions and sustainable buildings. We have, as you know, 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals designed to address the world's major challenges, and we're all responsible for achieving these objectives. Objectives that we believe that we contribute the most are improving water quality, reducing pollution, and minimizing the discharge of hazardous chemicals and substances. We are also engaged in initiating recycling and safe reuse initiatives in our factories. We also focus on achieving greater productivity through innovation and continuous training of our employees with the aim of producing more sustainable buildings. We are looking forward to reducing the impact of construction on the environment surrounding us. What we also focus is continuous innovation that allows us to use natural resources more efficiently. Now, how do we measure sustainability? Sustainability is measured through product declarations, environmental product declarations. They are verified by third parties, by an independent party. They're calculated over different life cycle stages, and this includes stages from A1 to C4. A1 to A3 mainly concerns the production life cycle. A4 is related to the transport to the construction site. The developers are mainly engaged in the phases B1 to B7, meaning exploitation, and the final stage is disposal. This concerns levels C1 to C4. Now, there are countries that have already adopted CO2 emission targets per square meters. As of this year, Denmark has already introduced certain CO2 limitations. As far as I know, it depends from the size of the buildings. Now, where do we stand in the statistics? As for our business and how do these requirements are set? How do we set those requirements within our business? Well, clients make CO2 emission claims when trying to get to the Scandinavian markets. In the face of the war, requirements to prevent the entry of materials and labor from companies sanctioned by unfriendly countries have become apparent, and it is very important to ensure that the products from these countries do not raise any issue as regards their entry into the market and their sustainability. In the project tenders, we provide CO2 emission calculations based on EPD verified data. And as early as possible. All CO2 calculations are performed automatically using data from building models. We use verified reports, and based on them, we produce a CO2 emission report per building. Our customers can analyze those indicators based on different target groups and compare them with the competitors. We then receive feedback from our customers as to how we look in the global markets that we act in. We also have another tool available, which generates from a designed model a list of products and as well as a CO2 emission report. This tool helps us to quickly adjust individual product items, and this is basically a matter of competence management, because we can see which products are major pollutants in the process. The third tool available for us is online calculations of CO2 emissions for individual products. With this tool available, we can basically assess CO2 emissions per project, per selected period, and per product group. And this way we can apply such project results for future projects as well. For instance, we can make assessments for 3 years, and then verified data are basically the ones that are received from the daily activities, and our daily activities can demonstrate certain results that can be summed up over a certain period of time. Our first EPD declarations were drafted in 2016 while working on a project in the Norwegian market. Our activities were unprecedented because there was nobody in Lithuania that was working in this way at that time. Together with Vesta Consulting back in 2021, we've prepared verified EPD declarations for the 11 product groups that we worked with. Since we already had some work done back in 2016, we've received certain verified results of our projects, so we were able to assess the reduction of CO2 emissions based on the products used. The same requirements are set for our suppliers. That is, when choosing the products for our production, for our constructions, we work only with green suppliers that are EPD certified and who have declared their environmental footprint. At the moment, about 80% of our suppliers have such EPD declarations or and the rest are planning to do that in the nearest future. The design-build approach supplies us with different opportunities for sustainability and CO2 reduction, as it helps us to avoid any errors on the construction side and helps us to ensure planning throughout the supply chain. Our construction starts from the transportation of products right away. All of this contributes to the CO2 reduction. Our construction is based on a building information modeling, which helps us to verify whether the construction products can be easily lifted with the help of cranes. So there is just a simple button on the cranes that helps us to see whether or not the load can be lifted. The screen shows how the problem should be approached, whether a more capable crane should be applied, or perhaps the load should be distributed in a particular way. In any case, this allows us to see the CO2, the effect on the CO2 emissions. During the designing process, all communication shafts are designed. This helps us to avoid any construction residue, and this ensures cleaner construction processes. When it comes to the documentation and production of our design, we try to reduce the information in our designs. We also have an app, mobile app available, which shows which products need to be fixed. Once done, certain information can be notified in the app. This ensures the quality of the final result in the buildings that we produce. We are working together with other institutions, such as the consortium of associations that conduct a study on the CO2 calculations for different building materials. An interesting aspect of this study is that, well, we tend to hear that wooden buildings need to be built to make our environment greener. Well, we shouldn't lose our heads over the greening aspect, because we know that if we cut down trees, we will not produce a greener environment. Once a tree is replanted, it is capable of ensuring a rebalance only 41 years on. So we should assess the benefits of a tree throughout its life cycle. We have to assess the maturity of trees when it comes to cutting them in order to ensure the maximum benefits when it comes to having a greener environment. So it is very important to run all the data available throughout the life cycle of a tree, rather than basing our processes on the information from one stage. In 2021, 30% of our projects, our finished projects, had buildings with the final finished facade. We are looking forward to have the most finished facade finishes available. This means that on the construction side, when it comes to compiling our building, we are willing to bring to our construction site finished products so that there are less processes necessary in the construction. And finally, the process of digitalization and the use of the lean principles and the application of sustainability practices has already reaped certain results. We have received a high score on the achievement in terms of sustainability certification. This is something that has not been achieved by any other company across the Baltic states. So Inhus is a company that is building a more sustainable company for a more sustainable future. Thank you very much, Artūras. Any more questions? Well, if not, then perhaps I could have a question, unless somebody is willing to pose a question, so please raise your hand. Now, did I understand it correctly? You said that you started everything in 2016. So how long did it take you to get to where you are right now? Yes, well, we started everything in 2016, and in the beginning, everything took us about a year because we had to systemize everything on the databases. This was meant to be prepared for the EPD preparation. This is a period that is quite lengthy, but it's useful once you do it. The microphone is off. The interpreters cannot hear it.
Aš nesuprantu, kodėl taip konferencijos dalyviai nėra aktyvūs.
Well, I don't understand why nobody is so active. Or perhaps they're not listening. Well, truly, congratulations to you for your achievements. But could you tell me, please, will the construction sector will be able to achieve zero emissions by the end of this year? Is this a target set for the sector, an objective? Especially if we bear in mind the construction side in China, the major pollutant worldwide. From my visits to China, I've noticed that all of the construction sites, they're all fully packed, and the buildings are extremely high there. And all of the buildings, all of the construction sites are fully covered. Something that I do not see here in Lithuania. The construction sites are open. When it comes to road building, again, the construction sites are open. This has been done for the past 20 years. Bearing in mind the environment conditions here, the wind that carries dust for more than 200, within the radius of more than 200 meters. So when looking for this CO2 footprint, do you think that everything is okay when it comes to our construction or road building sectors, or perhaps there are many problems here? Well, there are many problems. To achieve zero carbon emission by 2023 is a non-realistic goal. What we can do is set our objectives for 2030 or beyond that. To do that, however, we have to define a certain scoreboard so that all the data used in our calculations as to what is environmentally friendly and what is less environmentally friendly, and how can certain hazardous effects can be mitigated or compensated. So certain calculations need to be done to set a certain scoreboard before we set the ultimate objective. I'm not sure if we'll be able to eliminate fully hazardous materials, but science are definitely doing their part. Companies are also making a lot of effort in order to compete in the area in choosing more environmentally friendly materials. As for your question regarding the covering of construction sites, on our part, we are producing products that are completely finished. If we have, let's say, a wall, a brick wall that we deliver completed on site, we are covering it in order not to ruin it. And all our products that leave the country and go to other European countries, they're all covered so that they are not damaged. Our final product is constructed from finished parts, fully finished parts. We know that any works conducted in high altitude are hazardous, and it requires cautious works in these conditions, certainly. As for road construction, well, I believe this is not within my remit to answer this question. Thank you. And what about the head of the respective institution to respond to that question? Yes, well, as regards the covering of construction sites, we definitely make every effort to make sure that the citizens do not feel any effects of the works on the construction site. And if we were to compare the processes today and the ones from 10 years ago, our work is definitely more cleaner. And if we compare the constructed buildings, we can certainly see a difference in the construction of buildings from 10 years ago and today, because there is less noise, there's less pollution. This is something that we have been focusing on. As for the CO2 emissions, again, like it was said before, there is no clean material whatsoever, neither concrete nor any other material. China is the largest producer because it is the largest polluter worldwide, because it is the largest producer of construction materials. And concrete is the second most popular material in the construction sector following water. And it doesn't matter how green the energy that we produce, if our buildings are not as green as possible, our energy efficiency targets will not matter. Thank you very much. I see one more question pending. Yes, a brief question. Nerija Andrejauskienė, head of a private company. My question is, have you taken part in green public procurements? Because I haven't noticed you in our public procurement tenders. And do you think those green requirements, they help you compete better? So is your participation in green public procurements does your participation in green public procurements give you an edge, or perhaps you are focusing more on private tenderers? Well, yes, we do take part in the procurement procedures. We are mainly capable of winning tenders through our design. We're not fully capable of competing in the public procurements when it comes to full construction of our buildings. I would just like to add that Inhus is also the first company in Lithuania that won the competition, where they won the project of design, and in the competition the organizers informed us that they used the design that won the competition but did not implement it. So designing is one thing, and fulfilling the design, now that's a different thing. And apparently those requirements are just entering our market. When it comes to the construction of public buildings, we are a subcontractor, and on our part we can design buildings where other companies perhaps have less competences with regards to construction or construction with monolith materials. Usually the lowest price is related to the lowest price in designing. So if the cheapest design is chosen, this means that the cost will rise when it comes to the construction process. Thank you very much. So we have now already launched our discussion part. So let me introduce the main participants in the discussion. Mr. Artūras Skardžius, member of the Committee on Audit of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania. We have Mindaugas Macijauskas, Auditor General of Lithuania. We have Ms. Laima Liucija Andrikienė, member of the European Court of Auditors. We also have policy makers in the field, namely Ms. Erika Kurochkina, Deputy Vice Minister of the Economy and Innovations. We have Ms. Sigita Vasiljevaitė, Chancellor of the Ministry of the Environment of the Republic of Lithuania, Mr. Darius Vidrickas, Director of the Public Procurement Office. We have Mr. Dalius Gedvilas, Vice President of the Lithuanian Confederation of Industrialists, Mr. Audrius Tulaba, CEO of Inhus Group, who has just taken the floor, Mr. Giedrius Krasauskas, Head of Public Procurement Division of Vilnius City Municipality, and Ms. Jurgita Puzare, a person that I've discovered through Mykolas Romeris University since I've approached their public law department for any recommendations for anybody to take the floor today. So she is the head of strategic procurement at Lietuvos Geležinkeliai, or Lithuanian Railways. The questions in this part of the debate will be raised by me, so let me start the discussion from the question addressed to Mr. Artūras Skardžius and Mr. Mindaugas Macijauskas. After having listened to the keynote presentations from the European Commission representatives, we've listened to some practical aspects related to the green public procurements in Lithuania. Now, with regards to these presentations, how do the green public procurements look like on our arena? Thank you. Artūras.
Thank you to the organizers of this discussion and for the conference. It seems to me that, well, the situation is rather sad, especially having in mind the possibilities of the funding of the budget. Because we only have 8.2 billion euros in the budget. The state audit report shows that the public procurement demands the money that is by 3 times higher than that currently is available. The Auditor General has mentioned various reasons. Of course, we do know that the objective itself is very nice, to achieve 100% of green public procurement. Unfortunately, the instruments to achieve the objective have not been discussed. I believe that such a discussion should have taken place at least a few years ago. The debate should have brought together politicians, both from the executive and the parliament. We also had to talk this issue over with businesses. The associated structures asked our authorities for the money for various consultations as to how to implement the requirements, how to prepare the methodologies. Unfortunately, the 100% target is rather unrealistic. Well, again, I can repeat that we can put on our green glasses and think that the emissions will reduce by the end of this year. But this would be naive to think. I am convinced that there should have been a common European regulation with funding, with dedicated funding earmarked. And I believe that a lot of money will simply be wasted. The objective itself is very good. Unfortunately, we don't have the instruments to achieve that objective. That's why we now have a situation that the burn crude oil, although the objective is to reduce CO2 emissions, we also have problems with electricity prices for the consumers, because the prices were set under the law that was adopted back in 2013. So today we're talking about the Green Deal, but we're still reliable on gas, and we will be reliable on gas until 2044. Because again, it seems that we might think that the government is implementing the Green Deal, but on the other hand, we are trying to receive some benefits. I believe that we need a common approach towards that implementation. So this debate is already a good step forward, but as I have said, this debate should have taken place a few years ago. Thank you, Mr. Matsijauskas. Could you share your views and insights? There's no doubt this topic is very important, not only in the context of green public procurement, but also in the context of the European Green Deal and the environmental targets that we are to achieve in the EU. So objective itself is not to achieve 100% green procurement, but to reduce CO2, to reduce carbon footprint, to move to renewable resources, and so on and so forth. Green procurement is one of the means to contribute to this Green Deal. Having heard all the presentations, it has become clear that this green color has very many shades, and some procurement may be greener than others. Therefore, those who are making use of public finances have to answer how to calculate the CO2 emissions, and how will we know that we are on the right path towards implementing the objectives, and whether we are contributing to the environmental requirements. Therefore, we should not lose the track. We have to establish certain frameworks and to assess whether certain instruments contribute to meeting environmental objectives, rather than simply formally putting a tick that we have made green procurement. So the most important thing is not green procurement itself, but the overall achievement of climate change goals set by the European Union. Moreover, there are many more aspects, for example, the market itself, the supply and demand of certain products. We should understand that in all service sectors, in product sectors, it will not be possible to achieve 100% green public procurement, because sometimes, most probably, the market will not be able to offer the products that we need. And we might fail to achieve other important objectives in, let's say, the health or education sectors. So to conclude, I believe that it's very important to measure how green we are and how our green public procurement contributes to reducing our negative environmental impact. Now I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Laima Andrikienė, member of the European Court of Auditors. Now, is green public procurement an item on the agenda of the European Court of Auditors? Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this event and to participate in this debate. Most probably, I will not say anything new. Green public procurement have never been an item of the European Court of Auditors as a separate subject, despite the fact that it is a very important topic. The Court of Auditors sees green public procurement as one of the means to achieve other environmental objectives. Well, you talked about the reduction of CO2 emissions, the reduction of carbon footprint, and so on and so forth. Or, for example, transition to circular economy, or such questions as green energy. Well, I believe Rasa Budbergytė was the representative in the European Court of Auditors at that time, back in 2011. And I just looked how the European institutions are calculating the CO2 emissions. I remember there was a discussion in the Commission at that time, and there was a conclusion that the installation of the eco-management and auditing scheme in the European institutions is rather slow, that green public procurement is treated as an opportunity to choose rather than a mandatory requirement. Therefore, only a few institutions were applying them systematically. There is yet another important thing. European environmental instruments that are applied for the EU institutions are not that strict as those applied for the EU member states. Currently, a special report on circular economy is being drafted, and we want to know how European Union member states are moving towards circular economy. Among other things, our auditors try to assess how the European Commission monitoring system is functioning. The system has to monitor the trends of developing and installing various systems in the member states. Since public procurement amounts to a major part of procurement, they can contribute to the implementation of a circular economy. So the results of this audit will be available very soon.
Tai apie ką labai daug girdime ir Lietuvos viešojoje erdvėje ir apskritai ES visose valstybėse narėse.
Both in the Lithuanian public area and in the European Union, we heard a lot about the
įgyvendindami RRF audito strategiją visų pirma atlieka su RRF
audit,
kontrolės sistemomis susijusius
and
auditus.
the European Court of Auditors
naudojamos skaidriai ir pagal paskirtį. Vėlesniam etapui yra planuojami tematiniai
is also planning an audit on those instruments. Some thematic topics are also envisaged in the future. And within this context, green public procurement will also be assessed, especially having in mind if member states receive loans within the framework of RRF.
2,22 milijardų eurų RRF lėšų. Pagal planą tikslams prisidėsiantiems prie kovos su klimato kaita ir žaliosios transformacijos tikslų, žaliojo kurso įgyvendinimo,
the member states will be able to receive funding
37,8%.
37.8% of the total funding from the RRF for green transition, for the Green Deal, and so on and so forth. So green procurement will be promoted within this context. Therefore, I believe in the future, the Green Deal and the green public procurement will be on the agenda of the European Court of Auditors. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Sigita Vasiljevaitė. The government has set a very ambitious target. This measure has been included in the action plan. But now we are faced with the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. Still, the government is still set on fulfilling those objectives. Could you share your insights as to how everything was going on? Thank you very much for the organizers, for the opportunity to participate in this debate. Well,
pastabas, kurias
We're trying to
girdime dėl šio,
respond to
tikslo
the remarks
iškelto
related to
viešojo
the
sektoriaus
objective
kaip pavyzdžio,
that has been said.
nes tikrai generuojam maždaug 12% bendro vidaus produkto, tai yra
Public sector
6,5
generates
milijardus
12% of
eurų. Ir mes esam
GDP,
tie,
which
kurie
amounts
galim,
to
kaip
6.5
sakant,
billion
įdiegti naują
euros.
standartą
And we are the ones
visiems,
that are responsible for
kurie iš viso
establishing
mūsų
this
visuomenės yra nariai.
unified
Tai
standard
mes
for
to
the
tikslo
people who are
siekdami
members
iš
of our
tikrųjų
society.
dėkojame ir Seimui, kuris
So
pritarė vyriausybės programai.
we are very
Šis
grateful to
ambicingas
the
tikslas buvo
Lithuanian Parliament
iškeltas.
that has
Tai mes
supported
tiesiog
the
įgyvendindami
ambitious
tą tikslą, nes norim,
objectives
kaip ir sakėm, ne
included in the
kiekybinio
government
rodiklio
program.
100%
So
labiau, mes norim
we
kokybinio rodiklio,
are not
nes
pursuing
mūsų tai yra
the
ambicija, kad tiesiog
quantitative
būtų
objective,
naujas
but rather
standartas sukurtas
a qualitative
valstybėje, tai mes
objective.
tiesiog
We
irgi tas
want to
priemonės
ensure that
tokias
the
labiau
government
ne baudimo
establishes a
pasirinkome,
standard.
bet
We
tas
believe
tokias švelnes,
that
tai yra
punishing is not a
įkurtas
way
ačiū
out.
viešųjų pirkimų tarnybai, kurie tapo mūsų kaip sakant, partneriais šioje
The
srityje.
Public Procurement Office has become our partner.
Viešųjų pirkimų skyrių
The office has established a sustainable public procurement department within its organization, and this department raises awareness and educates companies, provides consultations to their customers. The number of consultations is increasing. We see that there's a huge interest in those consultations, and I'm very happy to note that last year
4,6 milijardai eurų buvo išleista žaliai.
That 4.6 billion euros were spent on green procurement. We are very happy about those figures. We recently awarded, actually last week we awarded the leaders of green public procurement. We saw quite a few very enthusiastic partners, so we awarded the Lithuanian Railways as well as the energy distribution operators and other companies. Now,
turėdami tą vyriausybės ambiciją, mes juos nustatėm vyriausybės
we have set the objectives under the resolution of the government. There was some transition period, and this year is the year when we have to achieve this 100% target, and we see that the contracting authorities are doing quite well. We see that the 100% target will not be achieved by the end of this year, but we see that the market is highly interested in the ways they could participate in green procurement and contribute to the objective of the government.
Gal tiesiog dar norėtųsi iš tikrųjų padėkoti partneriams.
I would also like to thank our partners, the Central Contracting Authority that has compiled the list of products. We are also very grateful to the Public Procurement Office that provides consultations to the market participants as well as to the contracting authorities. We are grateful to market participants because you are the voice which says whether we are ready or not. We try to respond to your expectations. We are eager to cooperate with you. We believe that our cooperation could yield results and ensure that we produce less emissions, less pollution and less waste. So we are well aware of those most polluting sectors. We will work towards improving our activities. Thank you. Now, I will later ask you about the impact assessment, but now I'd like to give the floor to the Director of the Public Procurement Office. Our question is as follows. How much attention does the office pay to public procurement, and what additional challenges you face?
didžiąją dalį iššūkių atliekam, kaip ir minėjau, į žaliuosius viešuosius pirkimus mes nežiūrėjom biurokratiškai, o šiek tiek pasižiūrėjom iš kitos pusės. Iš tikrųjų, matėm, kad tai yra kryptis, kuria valstybė eis ir kur reikia sukurti arba padėti perkančiosioms organizacijoms sukurti reikalingas kompetencijas.
Certain competences of the procuring organizations must be established in order to have public procurements as green, which is why we have established sustainable procurement division, which is mainly concerned with the upgrading of skills and competences with regards to green public procurements. When it comes to challenges with respect to green public procurements, I believe the number of challenges will increase, and what we have seen from the past is that the process of implementing green public procurements is definitely not as easy and smooth as it may seem. We have about 4,000 purchasing bodies, and certain sustainability aspects have to be bared in mind. We receive numerous queries, and the human resources that we have at the moment within our office are certainly insufficient to achieve better results. Thank you.
Turėsim, atsiprašau, ačiū Dariui, sakau, po 3 metų turėsim turėti patikrintą patikimą instituciją, kuri galės patvirtinti, ar žalio ženklinimas yra tikras. Tai tą instituciją bus įdomu bus pamatyti. Dabar žiūriu į ekonomikos inovacijų viceministrę Eriką. Jūs atsakinga už viešuosius pirkimus.
Vice Minister of the Economy and Innovation. You were mentioned as an institution that oversees the activities of the Central Purchasing Authority. So what solutions would you offer with regards to the challenges that we're facing in the field? Thank you very much. Thank you for gathering all us to this event. Perhaps I'm not as optimistic as my colleagues from the other institutions. I would just like to focus on a few other elements, and perhaps I will repeat something that the Auditor General has already mentioned. The goal in itself is not green public procurement. Green public procurement is merely an instrument. We do agree that it is an efficient instrument in pursuing the goals of the Green Deal. And the state in general is probably the largest purchaser in the public procurement. What we do observe is that the objectives involved in the green public procurement, such as ensuring competition, social, innovative, innovation-related criteria, etc., they tend to compete among each other. So what is important is to strike the right balance between the different criteria within the public procurement. We do not have the luxury of seeking one particular criterion in particular. Well, obviously, we've set a very ambitious target within just a year and a half. So what we can see from the public procurement policy is that such an ambitious goal may affect the tendencies with regards to the purchases. A certain share of purchases we've observed has went down if we were to compare from the years 2021 to this year, because apparently some of the purchasers are not able to adapt to the set requirements. There are also those that say that are not ready to comply with the requirements, although the deadline is at the end of this year. Quite recently, I had some conversations with the Seimas Committee on Education and Science, and the committee informed me that there are certain hints from the sector about certain concerns regarding the fulfillment of green requirements. We have to bear in mind that we're not isolated from the global market or the European market, and our expectations to reorient our activities towards green initiatives. This is something that requires some time. The administrative burden related to the green public procurements is certainly a challenge, so we must assess the environmental impact and the impact on competition when it comes to setting green requirements with regards to public procurement. So we would suggest establishing green requirements in other aspects without causing any additional strain in the area of public procurements. When it comes to the verification of certain targets, we would recommend using secondary products as well as invoking the solutions of shared economy. When it comes to solving issues, methodology is key, as well as communication with the businesses and the organizers of public procurement. This is important in order to manage everyone's expectation, including policy makers and businesses. That would be it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Minister. And now I'm leaning towards the organizers of public procurement, Mr. Krasauskas and Ms. Puzurė. Please tell me, public procurements are highly regulated, is a highly regulated sector. As organizers of public procurements, could you please tell me whether what you have heard from the representatives of the European Commission and the participants of today's discussion determined certain burden that will be placed on your shoulders, or perhaps you've heard that this will help you in conducting future green public procurements that will benefit the environment and society. Thank you very much. Well, perhaps I will share a few of my experiences while wearing my hat as a lecturer, teaching people on public procurement, green procurements included, as well as a representative of a major procurement organization. Our company group has four companies under its umbrella, and we are focusing on green public procurements. As for the road that we had to take towards green public procurements, it has been mentioned today that
organizing green public procurements is up to the organization and not merely certain specialists. So this was our strategic goal for a few years now, because the Green Deal has already gained pace. All of the decisions that have been made over the past few years were with the Green Deal in mind, meaning that we must have certain competences and certain responsibilities shared among ourselves. As for the green public procurements, last year, together with the policymakers, we've organized our action plans, our roadmap towards organizing green public procurements. Our entire team was involved, not only in the production of methodology, but also in all of the activities of our organization. Because, as it was mentioned, it was not the green public procurements that was the end goal. Rather, it is all the instruments and tools available in achieving the objectives of the green goal. The entire team must be aware of the green objectives behind public procurements. Certainly not all of the public procurements can be treated as green. From our perspective, electrification solutions are mainly the ones that are the object of our green public procurements, in addition to all other green solutions that are purchased through the green public procurements. However, the environmental aspect is something that will be assessed for many years to come as well. Well, thank you. I would agree with everything with what Jurgita has said, but perhaps if it was not the ambitious goal of the Ministry of the Environment, we would not be sitting here today. I believe back in 2011, the government has issued an order concerning green requirements with regards to public procurement. And I believe that the green public procurement back in the day accounted to 2.9% of all the public procurements compared to our statistics today. However, the process forced us to change our mindset. If it was not because of the push by the ministry, our organizations would not have even budged. Back in 2021, our green public procurements accounted to 70% of all of the public procurements. And we are moving slowly, steadily, and we are keeping contact with the ministry. I believe the majority of the public procurement organizers already have an idea as to how these public procurements should be run. And we are all in the process of change, which matters the most. Thank you, Giedrius. Let me briefly also add that the ambitious objective set definitely forced us to change our mindset. Since we didn't have data available, we know that the public procurement, the share of the public procurement that was green, and the information on that comes from the reports that we have made, since there was no statistics available back in the day. Simply to explain the huge difference in the statistics of a few years ago and today. Thank you very much. And now I'm leaning towards the representatives of the businesses. We've heard some very inspiring words from the organizers of public procurement. Dalius, could you please tell me, does your association have enough companies that
excel in terms of the implementation of the regulation that is currently drafted by the European Commission. Thank you very much, and thank you to the entire team for the invitation. Thank you to the Committee on Audit for inviting me to the event. After listening to this discussion, listening to what Giedrius has said, I have to say that I've just come back from a European conference where we heard the presentation from one of the European commissioners who informed us on the past and the future. He said that over the past 15 years, the European Commission has underwent several crises. And the leaders of the different federations represented there were really surprised that over 1 million of refugees from Syria came to Europe. However, the number of climate change refugees will be 10 times higher than the conflict refugees. Such a figure forced us to think about the ambitions set by the ministry. And this brings me once again to the question as to whether or not we are capable of achieving the objective. What I can say on my part is that if the purchasing authority, when calling a tender, does not apply green requirements, you can right away say that the purchasing authority is bluffing when it says that it is organizing a green public procurement. Achieving a green public procurement when it comes to the construction sector, a public procurement cannot be deemed as green unless building information modeling standard is applied. On our part, we are trying to establish a mandatory part of a contract in addition to establishing a qualifications criteria, a catalog of qualifications criteria, meaning that the purchasing authorities will not be entitled to develop their own know-how. Instead, they would have to use the criteria developed in the said catalog. Unless we have this, the state will not be able to achieve green public procurement targets. As for the road towards setting the necessary criteria, I believe the European Commission is on the right track. Inhus is a flagship organization in our construction sector. They have been constructing residential areas, and they have been doing this elsewhere, not in our country. It sets standards and an example. It's a company that today is capable of achieving green public procurement criteria. But when asked how many contracts are you awarded in the green public procurements, apparently none when it comes to constructing green buildings. Instead, contracts are awarded to those companies that ensure zero transparency, zero environmentally friendly solutions.
Tai palieku šitą retorinį klausimą valstybės institucijų vadovams ir tikrai šiandieną galvoju, kad renginys yra labai geras ir
think about that and the requirements for the green public procurements that are set and how many companies are capable of meeting those requirements.
sveikinti reikėtų turbūt vyriausio kontrolierio tarnybą ir audito komitetą ir
I believe
pasakyti,
that
kad
the
labai gerai, bet
National
norėčiau
Audit Office
ko gero
and the
padėkoti
Public
ir Seimo
Procurement
nariui Artūrui
Office
Skardžiui,
should
kuris
be
atkreipė
congratulated
dėmesį,
for
kad
their efforts, and I believe we
Statybininkų
should also
asociacija,
thank Mr.
Lietuvos
Skardžius
pramonininkų
for
konfederacija, Kelininkų asociacija prašė
noticing
RRFO
that the
finansinių
construction
išteklių, kad galėtų
sector, that
panaudoti
the
šios išteklius, edukuojant
road
savo
construction sector
darbuotojus, kad galėtų įsigyti programinę įrangą būtent tiems sprendiniam įgyvendinti.
were
Dalyvauja diskusija Audrius Tulubai.
asking for
Ačiū Audriu, kad sutikai
support
atvykti šičia.
for
Tai iš tikrųjų reikėtų matyti
establishing
vadovų
certain
paklausti, kiek
technical
vienkartinė investicija
solutions,
yra į
green technical
programinę
solutions to
įrangą
achieve the
įmonėje per
set
metus,
green requirements.
kiek kainuoja viena darbo vieta, kad galėtų skaičiuoti
The software that the
CO2 pėdsaką ir visus
companies
kitus dalykus.
need to be
Kiek
able
reikia
to
kiekvienais
assess
metais
their
statybos
carbon
rangovui
footprint
investuoti į
is
programinę įrangą,
expensive.
kad sugebėtų
You can imagine how much investment it takes for the company to achieve sustainability requirements,
Tai tos, nuo kurios turi
especially
500
bearing in mind that
darbuotojų ir
certain
daugiau jau
reports
kitais metais turi
for
deklaruoti,
the European Union will
ar
have to
daro
be presented
poveikį aplinkai,
next year.
žmogaus teisėms, socialiniai aplinkai, tada klausimas, turime kitą teisės aktą, kuris įpareigoja šiandieną
And let us not
taikyti
forget that there is
metodologiją
also
dideliuose
another
projektuose ir yra mums
legal
deadline'as,
act that
grafikas, per kiek laiko turi prie to
obliges
pritaikyti įmonės.
companies
Ar turime
to
finansinę paramą šitiem dalykam? Neturime. Pasako,
apply the building
pasiruoškite versus per
information
tiek laiko turėsite
modeling
taikyti.
standard.
Bet jeigu neduodami finansiniai ištekliai, šiandien statybos sektorius gauna mažiausiais
At the moment, the
struktūrinės
construction
paramos, mažiau
sector
žemės ūkio.
receives
Jeigu šito dėmesio nebus, mes dėl
the
paukščiuko
lowest
galime
share
padaryti. Niekada
of
nelaimėsime
structural
konkurso,
support
jeigu bus
funds.
keliami
And our
reikalavimai
companies will not
žaliesiem
be able
pirkimam.
to win,
Tai
to,
reikia apsispręsti. Tie
will not be able
pasiūlymai,
to
kuriuos
win
teikia statybininkų asociacija, jie nėra iš
tenders
Mes irgi esame
unless certain
mūsų visuomenės
support
dalis.
is
Mes
delivered
sakome,
to
kad
them
galime prisidėti prie mūsų
for the
valstybės
purpose of achieving
žalinimo, planetos
green
žalinimo, bet
public
reikia
procurement
susitarti ir paprasčiausiai
criteria.
atkreipiu dėmesį, kad tos problemos nebus įgyvendintos,
So
jeigu
we
iš
have
socialinių
to
partnerių
join our
pasiūlymus bus
efforts and
žiūrima,
work together
jie ten visą laiką prašo.
and not
Siūlau atkreipti
ignore
dėmesį. Ačiū.
the
Ačiū labai ir dabar
requirements
žiūriu
of
į
our
Audrių
social
Tulabą
partners.
ir
Thank
galbūt
you.
galėčiau kaip
And now I'm looking
perfrazuoti
at
pasakymą.
Mr.
Giedriaus,
Tulaba,
jisai
so
sako,
perhaps I could
jiem
rephrase what
aplinkos
Giedrius has
ministerija
said.
įspyrė.
They're
Sakykit,
telling
o kas
us
jums
that
įspyrė,
the
kad
Ministry of the
2016
Environment
metais jūs ėmėtės daug
pushed
anksčiau šitos
for this major
iniciatyvos.
ambition,
Ir tada taip
and
pat ir
who
Daliaus
pushed
klausimai dėl
your
to, na, kiek
organization
kainuoja turėti
even
žmogų,
before
kuris
that? And then
skaičiuoja
again,
CO2.
like Dalius has said, how much does it cost for your company to calculate the carbon footprint?
I guess we all needed this push. Because back in 2016, no one talked about all those environmental aspects. Well, since in Lithuania we had there was no market for us in Lithuania, we went with our products to Scandinavian countries. I believe that we cooperated with all the stakeholders, including the customers, and we made sure that the requirements are met. Mindaugas, as well as other people, said that it is very important to assess how much green we are, but I believe that it's very important to differentiate between those green procurement. In fact, we all want to calculate CO2 emissions, but has anyone calculated the CO2 emissions that have been saved over the last year? Well, you won't be able to calculate this by hand. You need dedicated software I believe that building information modeling is relevant not only for the construction company, but also for various public institutions. We have to have the data from real construction companies, and we all need to have those data bases. They need to be transparent, but having in mind the prices of the software and the trainings that are needed for the various manufacturing companies, I believe that we do need some additional funding. It would be difficult for me to say how much the software costs, but I believe that we spend hundreds of thousands of euros, maybe $1 million, in some separate cases. Now, we use a tikrovė license. This license might cost some 30 to 40,000 euros. So we have developed the software ourselves. We have taken the data from the models, that is from this expensive original software.
Dėkui.
Thank you.
Sigita, tas klausimas nenumaldomai artėja link
Sigita,
jūsų ir kontrolierės
I have a question to you.
Ir Europos komisijos atstovai sakė, štai ir verslo. Kaip pamatuoti tą naudą?
How to measure the benefit that we will receive from the green public procurement? Are there any plans? Thank you. We are already implementing those plans. We are currently, the analytical analysis is underway, and we are trying to assess several aspects. First, the environmental aspects in the most polluting areas, that is in the textile industry, construction, agriculture, and so on. We also want to assess the impact that this ambitious target and green procurement makes on the market, whether the market is able to adapt. And we believe that this monitoring should be ongoing, continuous. We want to ensure that this green procurement is assessed, increases in value rather than in quantity. We will cooperate with the Public Procurement Office, and we will try to integrate the data in the scoreboard so that we could compare which variant we should choose in the system itself. So we will, of course, look at the cost-benefit analysis rather than look for the cheapest solution. So I guess I'll finish at that. Thank you. And now I have a second question to our panelists. Mr. Vedrickas, Mr. Karasauskas, and Madam Puzarė. Is there a single solution, an easy or difficult one, that would make your job easier?
Na, žiūrėkite, turbūt vieno stebuklingo dalyko mes turbūt neturėsime.
I believe that we won't have this one magic pill. Well, you can say two.
Kompleksas.
I believe that we need a complex of measures. First, I would very much hope that the Ministry of the Environment and the Public Procurement Office provides us with very clear criteria when it comes to green public procurement. We do know that a lot of things have changed recently. And we know this from
kad jie negali laimėti viešųjų pirkimų, nes
our
ateina tie,
court
kurie
cases.
dempinguoja kainas, nesilaikydami tam tikrų standartų.
We
ir
know
visų
of the
kitų.
cases
Tai
when
tiesiog
companies
reikia eiti
try
prie tam
to
tikrų standartinių
reduce the
kriterijų.
prices
Čia aš
artificially,
galim sutinku.
but they are able to
Palikti
participate in
laisvės,
public
jeigu mes
procurement
norime
and
objektų
win
kitaip padaryti, nes
contracts.
viską į vieną kurpalių nesuvyniosime.
I believe that
bet
several measures are
norisi
needed,
daugiau
several
tos
solutions are needed to address the
techninės
problem, but what we do
Kad mes-
expect that
okei,
we could
mes
receive
geležinkeliai,
more
turbūt
technical
10 didžiųjų perkančių
support. Maybe
organizacijų
some
gali
10
pasitelkti
biggest
išorės,
contracting
resursus,
authorities
savus
can
resursus,
make
kad
use of
susidėliotume.
both
Bet ir tai
internal
sudėtinga.
and
O ką jau kalbėti
external
apie likusius
resources.
3900
But
perkančiųjų
the rest,
organizacijų, kur žmonės, jeigu jie yra
3,900
trys kontoroj,
contracting
tai jiems dar
authorities
domėtis žaliaisiais
with
viešaisiais pirkimais,
very few
atsiprašau,
people
truputį jau
won't be able
viršija
to
galimybes.
acquire all the necessary competences for green procurement. Thank you for mentioning those smaller contracting authorities. I'll contribute to that. Well, there are a lot of contracting authorities that need a lot of support when it comes to public procurement. But now, if we are talking about those ambitious objectives, it is very important to distinguish between the strategic objects, entities, and operations, because we should not be focusing
Tai gal toksai dalykas ir pagalba tai tikrai labai reikalinga ir čia
on one part only. Now, we are convinced that we won't be able to complete the process by 2023. We will learn certain things, but this real green public procurement is something that requires training. We need practice, we need examples, we need to show this to all contracting authorities, how to do this in real practice. We have to talk about practice and how to implement this in practice. We need this real assistance, and it will be needed in the future.
Na, mes iš tikrųjų labai daug kalbam apie žaliuosius viešuosius pirkimus.
Well, we talk a lot about green public procurement, but during my presentation, I asked what our major goal is. What are we trying to achieve? As the Public Procurement Office, we believe that the major objective of the state should be reducing CO2 footprint, and our objective does not require many financial and human resources. We simply need to develop a CO2 calculation instrument that could be applied in the green public procurement, because this will provide huge additional added value and benefits. We have to know why we need green public procurement, what effect this will create. We have to calculate the savings of CO2. Now, when it comes to businesses, we have to ensure that the businesses that invest into more sustainable products and services have the competitive edge. We are looking for the opportunities to do so. I'm very hopeful when it comes to this, and we do follow the example of the Scandinavian countries. Maybe we will find some other member states, and we will co-finance the development of the necessary model. And common methodology. We should speak about environmental impact rather than green public procurement as a goal. Most probably, very few employers say what their major objective is, and workers simply do not know how green public procurement will contribute to, let's say, future perspective of both that person and the company. Thank you. We are running out of time. I'm looking now at Mr. Artūras Karčius and Madam Laura Andrikienė. Now, what do you think is the key message that contracting authorities should be taking home? Your opinion.
Aš pirmiausia dėkoju visiems
First and
dalyviams,
foremost,
kurie
I'd like to
atsiliepė į šį
thank
kvietimą,
all the
tiek
participants who accepted the invitation by the Committee on Audit and the General Audit Office, but it seems to me that
vieną
the
kitą lapą turi prisidengti kažkuo tai.
Emperor is
Reikėjo
naked.
dabar per po pandeminiam laikotarpį
Did we
prasidėjus
truly
karui,
need
energetinė krizė,
in the post-pandemic
infliacija
period,
didžiulė,
during the
dar
war in
užsikrauti
Ukraine,
šitą
with
metais,
the
kad pusantrų
soaring
metų pasiekti tokį tikslą,
inflation,
kurio nei viena
did we really
Europos
have to
Sąjungos
achieve
valstybė
the
nekėlusi
objective
100%,
that none of the
viešieji
EU member
pirkimai.
countries
Tai aš manau, kad
had
čia
set?
visi sėdintys už stalo tikrai
I believe that everyone gathered here
būkime sąžininkai prieš save ir būtent supranta, kad tai tikrai
understand
neįgyvendinamas tikslas ir
that
akcentavo visi.
it is impossible to
Čia
implement such an
dalyvavę asmenys,
objective.
tai čia
I've
turbūt
heard that from
pagrindinė
many of
būtų
you
žinutė,
during
kad
this
reikia būti
debate. So the key
sąžiningais
message
prieš
is
save.
that we have to
Aplinkos
be
ministerija
truthful
minėjo
to
4
ourselves.
milijardus išleisti už
The
viešuosius
ministry
pirkimus.
mentioned
Aš
of the
prašyčiau,
4
kad
billion
valstybės kontrolė
euros
pažiūrėtų, kiek ten iš tikrųjų
that
yra,
were
kiek ten to
used for
žaliojo
public
melo,
procurement,
kokia
but
proporcija
I
yra
think
tose
that the
pirkimuose,
National
nes
Audit
jeigu mes
Office should
meluosime
look
patys
into
sau,
the
tai
situation
išties
and check how much
nesame
greenwashing
paveitas, kad kur nafta iš
is
po kojų
in
pinigai
this
trykšta, ar ne?
public procurement
Mokesčių
report.
mokėtojų 8 milijardai tai yra dideli pinigai, ypač tokiu sunkiu laikotarpiu, kai reikia padėti ir Ukrainai.
This is a lot of money for a small nation like Lithuania, because Lithuania is now
Bet tai yra
trying to
didelė
help
problema ir aš taip pat
Ukraine.
kviesčiau RRF pinigus.
I would also
2,2 milijardai ir 1,8
take note of
skolintų.
the
Tik būtent tam
funding from
sukurti
the RRF.
atsigavimui ir stabilumui nukreipti. Tai yra 4 milijardai. Negi iš tų
So,
pinigų čia negalima skirti
I
verslui,
hope that
edukacijai,
some money from this
programoms,
4 billion
kad
will
išties mes galėtume
could be
turėtume
allocated to
instrumentą,
businesses
kaip
so that they
vertinti
could develop
pasiektą efektą, tą CO2
programs
emisiją, galbūt tikrai
and
tas kriterijus
so that they
yra
could assess how they
pats,
could achieve
toks,
the
suprantamiausias visiems. Nes
reduce
mes
CO2
galime
emissions.
Užsidėti žalius akinius ir žvelgti į medinius namus ir sakyti, kad tai yra tikra ekologija, nors iš tikrųjų
Well, we might
aiškiai
say
pavyzdžiai
that
byloja,
building
kad 40
wooden
metų
homes
reikės laukti,
represents
kol pradės absorbuoti CO2.
green
Valstybė nusistatyti
economy,
aiškius
but this is not
prioritetus.
true. The state
Kur
has
galima.
to set clear
Na,
priorities.
Mažai buvo šiandieną minėta
Little has been said
Atliekos.
today about
Atliekų
waste,
tvarkymas.
about waste management.
Milijardai investavome į
Billions
žiedinės
have been
ekonomikos
invested
labai
into
svarbų
circular
elementą,
economy,
milijardą litų
into one part
į
of
mechaninio
circular
biologinio
economy,
apdorojimo įrenginius.
to
Atliekų degintojai reikalauja iš politikų
Waste
ir
management
spaudžia
systems.
politikus, kad šie renginiai būtų apeinami ir aplinkos ministerija talkina jiems,
unfortunately,
nustatydami kodus tokius, kad būtų labai
Our
kaloringos
institutions,
atliekos patektų šilumos ir elektros gamybai į atliekų deginimo kogeneracinės elektrinės, jėgainės.
sometimes the one that
Tai
sets
šiuo atveju
too
tikrai aplinkos ministerija turėtų
little
čia
requirements
brėžti
for
pirmus
the
smuikus,
companies, and I
tai,
think
ką
that
galima
the
perdirbti, nebūtų
Ministry of the
sudeginama.
Environment
Nes po
should
MBA apdorojimo
stress
lieka mažai
that
kaloringas kietas atgautas kuras.
much
Bet jiems
of the
reikia deginti viską, kas
waste,
dega. Ir pasimti, aišku, pinigus už tai. už
not all
atliekų
the waste
sutvarkymą.
should be
Sudeginimas pas mus yra reglamentuojamas kaip atliekų sutvarkymas. Negana to,
incarcerated.
dar aplinkos ministerija uždega šviesą,
Moreover,
kad
the
CO2
Ministry
būtų
of the
didesnis
Environment
medžiagų kiekis, tai importuoti leisti
allowed
atliekas. Ir tai turime daug
importing
pavyzdžių,
waste,
kada
and
į
we have
mūsų
very many
jėgaines
examples
neužtenka
when
atliekų,
our
pastatytos labai didelės
power
gamybos,
plants
tai importuojame ir vėl tą
import
pėdsaką
the
didiname. Tai
waste
reikėtų
and
tokius
increase
sprendimus.
the
Na, neturėtų
CO2
būti turbūt
footprint.
tokių sprendimų, kaip
So I
statybinių
believe
atliekų, na, naudojimas
that construction
kuršių
waste
nerijos krantinės
should not be
tvirtinimui. Su
used
armatūra,
for
su cementu, su
strengthening, for
betono
reinforcing
gabalais.
the embankment
Yra, jeigu
of
kas
the
nežinote,
Curonian
audito komitetas specialiai
spit.
vyko į tai
Most
susipažinti,
probably
tai yra
you don't
interviu,
know,
kad
but the
pasižiūrėkite,
Committee
ten
on Audit went
keletą
on a
metrų
study with
norės
visit,
užpilta ir
and
tai yra, na, tokie apsimestiniai
well,
dalykai,
we
nedaro, na, garbės nei
were informed that
teritorijų, saugomų
tons
teritorijų
of
tarnybai, nei
concrete
visiems kitiems parko
and
prižiūrėtojams.
metal wiring
Lietuvos
have been put
geležinkeliai Ignitis.
on the
Taip, jie
embankment of the
turėtų
Curonian
išties
spit.
taikyti
Now,
aukščiausius standartus.
I believe that, for example,
Bet,
the Lithuanian company as
aplamai
Lithuanian
vengia
Railway
viešųjų
should
pirkimų.
apply
Ir su viešųjų pirkimų
highest
tarnyba
possible
bylinėjasi
standards, but
teismuose,
unfortunately
bet tai
this
nėra
company
perkančiosios organizacijos,
is
tai
trying
turi
to
būti
avoid
taikomi viešieji
applying
pirkimai.
all the
Tai čia
requirements
būtų
related to
palinkėjimas,
public
na, tiesiog
procurement, but
valstybės
instead
valdomos įmonės
they
baigti bylinėtis su
take
viešųjų pirkimų
the
tarnyba
public
ir galų gale
procurement
imtis žaliųjų
office to
pirkimų,
court.
aplamai viešųjų ten pirkimų, o tada jau, na, juos žalinti, jeigu
Gerbiamas
girdite. Tai štai, tai tokie būtų
Mr.
mano
Artūras.
palinkėjimai ir aš manau, kad tikrai
So I hope
pati
that the
pradžia yra
situation will
puiki
change. I believe
ir
that
tai,
the
vadinu,
first
startinių
things
mūsų
go in a positive
valstybėje
direction.
žaliųjų pirkimų, na, ta pirmąja apvalaus stalo diskusija.
And I'm very happy that we had this very first debate, although it was needed much earlier. Well, I asked for one message, and it seems that you gave a message each participant.
Taip, gerai, Laima, žodis jums.
Laima, I pass the floor to you now.
Bandysiu pasakyti, kad tai yra viena
Thank you very
žinutė, bet
much.
iš keturių dalių.
I'll try to say that it's just
Pirma,
one message, but
nepaisant
it's
visų
composed of
problemų,
four
kurias
parts.
šiandien aptarėm,
First of all,
būkime
despite of the
ambicingi.
problems that we have discussed
Būkime
today, let's
ambicingi,
be
siekdami
ambitious
žaliojo
nevertheless.
kurso
Let's be
tikslų
ambitious
įgyvendinimo
towards
ir
achieving the
skatinti
goals of the Green Deal
viešuosius žaliuosius
and
pirkimus.
in the promotion
Žalioji
of
transformacija yra mūsų
green public
darbotvarkėje, visos
procurements.
ES
Green
mūsų
transformation
taip pat,
is
jinai
on the
neabejotinai
agenda
yra
of
prioritetas.
the EU as well as our country as well, no doubt about that. And there is no other option here available. To my mind, other options would be short-sighted. Second part of my message, and I'm not talking about us, I'm talking about society in general. So I believe we should get rid of the stereotypical thinking as to what should be considered as a green product, and that implementation of green public procurements is cost-effective. Sure, the initial price is high, but if we assess all further costs, they are usually really low if we take into consideration all other costs in the process. And I have in mind the legislators as well, since our discussion is taking place here in the Parliament of Lithuania. I believe we should all have an understanding that we should not lean on the lowest price criteria in the public procurements. Rather, it should be the costs throughout the life cycle of any product. Another point, something that has been mentioned today is we should be united, because if institutions, companies act in isolation, this will not yield any results. Raising our competences and competences of our institutions is a certain necessity. And my final point regards criteria, which without a doubt is important to say the least. Without the established criteria, nothing can be achieved. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I would now like to ask Mindaugas to help me in summing up this conference. Mindaugas, try to say things even better than Laima did. Laima always does a good job. We've talked a lot about an ambitious goal. I don't remember the author, but he once said that if your goals do not make others grin, then apparently they're not ambitious enough. Today we heard many people saying a few words on
yra daug matyt
this
abejonių, kiek tas
ambitious
100
goal.
procentų yra pilnai
There are
žalias.
many
Kaip jo atspalvių tame
doubts
100
as
procentų yra
to
visokių, ir labiau žalių, ir mažiau žalių.
achieving
Ir ką
100%
minėjo gerbiama Laima, taip
of
matyt labai
public
svarbu susitarti,
procurements,
tai ką mes laikom tuo
of green public
žaliu viešuoju
procurements.
pirkimu arba
There are many
prekia ar paslauga.
disagreements as to what should be deemed as a green public procurement. Obviously, certain criteria needs to be established so that we have the same understanding as to what should be treated as
Kur
a
šiek tiek
green
sukelia
public
abejonių dėl
procurement.
tų viešųjų pirkimų, tos
As for what raises doubts with
kurį,
regards to
na,
achieving
rodė
the
gerbiamas Darius,
100%
kiek
target,
dabar mes turim žaliųjų viešųjų
as mentioned
pirkimų
by Darius,
savo, sakykime, Lietuvoje. Tai kad, ką pasakoja verslo atstovai, jie
as well as representatives
nepatenka,
of the
jie
business,
nedalyvauja arba jie nelaimi tuose
who said that they are
kuomet
not able
pateikia tikrai
to
žalią produktą.
win
O
the
laimi tikriausiai
tenders,
ne tie, kurie pateikia
even though
žalią
they
produktą arba
deliver a
ne tokį
green
žalią,
product.
kokį mes
Instead,
įsivaizduojam.
those that
Tai dėl tos
deliver
statistikos, kiek
a
mes iš tikrųjų
non-green
šiais
or
metais
not
turėsim
exactly
tų
green
tikrų
products
žalių
are the
viešųjų
ones that
pirkimų,
win
matyt, kils daugam abejonių.
contracts.
Bet čia šiuo
So I
atveju
believe
matyt
this
irgi
is something
kitas
that
nemažiau svarbus
will
aspektas yra
raise
valstybės finansai, nes
some
visas tas
discussions
paslaugas,
in the
prekes ir
future,
kitus dalykus mes
but
perkam iš valstybės biudžeto lėšų,
funds is
kurios yra
another
ribotos.
aspect
Jeigu tikriausiai
of
niekas mūsų
concern.
neribotų, tai mes galėtumėm pirkti ir
Since funds are scarce and limited, we cannot afford ourselves to ensure 100% green public procurements.
Ir čia matyt labai svarbu susitarti su ir
So
tiek dėl kriterijų, tiek dėl prioritetų.
finding an
Ko mes
understanding
siekiam, ar
with
labiau
regards
būti
to
inovatyvūs, ar labiau
the
žali, ar
criteria
dar kokių nors,
and the
kitokių.
targets is important.
Buvo paminėta, na, kodėl verslas nuėjo tą žalumo kryptimi. Ir
We talked about
pavyzdys buvo klientas,
businesses
kuris
opting
norėjo
for
tokios paslaugos arba norėjo
the
tokios
green
prekės.
choice.
Tai matyt, valstybė irgi yra tas užsakovas, kuris galbūt gali diktuoti tam
Perhaps
tikras sąlygas. Kaip
state
klientas, ko
institutions
jisai nori,
can also be the
kokio žalumo
ones
prekių ir
that
paslaugų nori. Ir
dictate
tikrai
the
turėdami, čia
conditions.
buvo skaičius 6-8 milijardai, tai dabar bijau pasakyti, kuris tas viešųjų pirkimų skaičius yra teisingas.
I'm not
Virš
sure
8 milijardų
which figure of
perkama
green
viešųjų
public
pirkimų būdu, tai matyt
procurements
pakankamai reikšminga
is
pinigų suma,
correct. I believe 8
12%
billion
BVP,
euros of
kuri, na, iš tikrųjų gali
GDP
suformuoti tam tikrus įpročius, tam tikrus reikalavimus ir
is a
sąlygas
very
tiem patiem viešiesiem
motivating
pirkimam ir
sum of
formuoti
money
tam tikrą rinką. Žinoma, tas
when it
užtrunka
comes to
laiko.
developing the
Ką minėjo
market.
tiek
Certainly
Europos
this takes
komisijos
time,
atstovai,
and the
tiek
representatives of the
suformuoti
European
kriterijus, tiek
Commission
matyt
have
pačiai
already
rinkai persitvarkyti
informed
prie
us how
to
long it
žalumo
takes
standartų
to set
reikalavimų.
certain green
Tai per
criteria.
keletą metų nepavyks padaryti, bet tikiu, kad einam teisinga kryptimi.
A few years will not be enough, but I believe that we are on the right track and we will definitely achieve our target, perhaps not the 100% target, but something close to that.
Bet tą žalią kryptį, CO2.
What is also important having is not only the 100% green public procurement targets, but also the green direction in general that contributes to making our planet a better place to live. So thank you very much to all. Thank you for taking your time and taking part in this discussion, as well as for your personal experience. Well, apparently, there's nothing left for me to say. Perhaps just a thank you to our interpreters. This completes our broadcasting of today's discussion. And on behalf of the Committee on Audit of the Seimas, I would like to invite everyone for a cup of coffee for some informal discussions.